The trouble with Irish rugby is there's very little dissent from players to all the commentators on this show. No one was calling in early 2019 that Ireland's game plan had been figured out. Andy, it was September, but you've been saying it for a while. I don't know where to go with this post-mortem, given the conversations we've had over the last couple of weeks. What do you think? Where did it all go wrong?
We have to do
where do we go from now?
Here? Maybe we could focus on where do we go from here. Maybe.
How do you? If Philip Brown gives you a call in the morning and says, "Andy, I've been watching everything you've said there. You're making a lot of sense. We need to put some sort of a plan in place for the next 4 years." What's your top three?
My gut feeling is that first of all, we don't need to do one of these
Genesis style reports.
Oh, Jesus, like spare me. I mean, what I would think would be wise is actually. I saw Gordon Darcy had suggested giving players the kind of immunity in terms of, don't disclose their identity but ask for their feedback and, take the gloves off and get full feedback from the players. I think that would be smart. And maybe they should just leave it at that. You don't need another Genesis report. There's nothing wrong with the game in Ireland in terms of we've very successful provincial or club setup. I mean, Wales are pathetic in the Pro 14. They've never got close to winning a European title, but they've had 3 World Cup semi-finals. They're in this dud game this morning, but they're still in it, the 3rd, 4th place playoff. They've 3 Grand Slams and 4 championships under Gatland, and they've a lot of young guys who are going to develop for the next World Cup. So they're in a healthy state. Irish rugby below the tier of the national side is in a much healthier state than Wales, for example. Yeah. It's just literally about, we don't need a root and branch analysis of everything that's wrong in Irish rugby. We just need to get the Irish team playing well, and it's very, very achievable.
Does that involve not talking about 4-year cycles? Does that involve not getting focused on playing New Zealand in 2023?
I think if we want to be successful in the next World Cup, we've got to try and develop a style of play that, for example, we may struggle with in certain games. And if it's a Six-Nation game here or there that we lose but are trying to play a certain way, who cares, in my mind? Well, the IRFU obviously care because it's 80% of the revenue that's generated by the national team, the Six Nations. But, England have lost key games in the last year in the Six Nations. They drew 38-all with Scotland when they should have gone and won it. But they were trying to play a certain style of rugby. And I always think it's easier to play a certain style of rugby and slightly tighten up and make it a bit more accurate than play incredibly tight, conservative rugby and then try and branch out. And when we've tried to branch out at a World Cup, it doesn't work because you're under huge pressure, huge intensity, and you can't replicate skills that you haven't practiced before. We could run into the opposition and fall on the ground again and do that for another 4 years, and our emotional pitch will get, classic example is we're going to be playing England in this Six Nations, and every Tom, Dick and Harry on the street is the Irish begrudger, and we're going to love it, and we'll probably beat them, and we beat the world champions because we did it in 2004.
Yeah.
And it's a good memory. It's a good memory for everyone. But we were garbage in 2007 again. So, I mean, we're just going to keep repeating the cycle. Then we just shut up going on about the World Cup because it's never going to change unless we have some breadth of vision and some commitment to actually playing a certain style of rugby.
So you would sort of recommend an acceptance that we don't have to win, and I appreciate that. Obviously,
I'm not saying throw a game, yeah.
But like so would you extend that out then to the player group in terms of like where we should go from now, from like dead dot, from here to the next 4 years, like with the managing caps, I suppose, is that the euphemism to put it, to ultimately shift out a bunch of the older players and put faith in the younger lads to come in and rack up those caps? That results aren't necessarily going to go your way.
Not necessarily, no. I think it should happen, in a very, very natural way. I think they should just pick on form, which we haven't done we've history on that too. We don't pick on form, we pick on reputation. And if we were to very, very simply change to picking on form, there'd be changes anyway. So I wouldn't throw out you know, a set group of players or anything like. They're all very, very talented, resilient blokes, and they're well able to play good rugby again, most of them. So I wouldn't consider, you know, this drastic chop six of the squad, bring in a bunch of 17-year-olds and build it from there. It's pointless. But, you know, establish a style that is a bit more creative in attack, improve our defence. They're just simple things to work on with the top coaches that are there, and simply then to look at picking on form as opposed to reputation. Those couple of things done alone mightn't bring you a guaranteed Grand Slam or Six Nations, but it'll see a continuity and an improvement in our play. They might enjoy it, they might relax, they might have a nice energy about the group, which, I don't know, you were over in Japan, and everything I've heard is that, you know, lots of the teams and squads were enjoying it, except Ireland.
You would say that.
I thought Ireland seemed pretty happy most of the time. I think the New Zealand result, actually, performance came as a shock to a lot of them, which maybe is a bit more of a concern.
Okay.
But like that they didn't actually see this coming, that perhaps in a week where you get pulverised by New Zealand, you should actually see the indicators in training. Rather than actually seeing the indicators.
Some of them were saying it was one of the best prep weeks. I heard Johnny Sexton say it was one of the best prep weeks he's ever had.
I think James Ryan made similar sounds as well. So, like, that doesn't exactly fill you with a whole pile of confidence either.
It doesn't. Yeah, where it's a bit like the doc there going around in circles before me. I'm getting dizzy. No, I'd be pretty adamant if, like you said, if Philip Brown rang me, I would say there'd be my recommendations. Don't spend loads of money on a review that no one cares about. Ask the players their opinion and pick on form and give the new coach a chance. I think Andy Farrell's got, from what I gather, a very similar outlook on attack, for example, to Stuart Lancaster, having worked together with England. And that alone makes me kind of relax a little bit and think, right, we're actually going to play some rugby.
Andy Farrell, or Stuart Lancaster, obviously was a guy who went into the Ireland camp at some point over the last couple of years and had a bit of an input. And is there room for more of that now? Is that?
Yeah. Well, the amazing thing is that the entire England coaching ticket from the 2015 World Cup, all of them now are based in Ireland.
Bad,
so we've Roundtree down in Munster, Stewart in Leinster as head coach, we've Farrell as Ireland head coach, and Mike Catt. So the entire group. I wonder if maybe they get the band back together and give the World Cup another go. You never know. But I think there would certainly be I think they've all a very healthy working relationship. They're all good mates still, and that augurs well because, you know, you would hopefully find I suppose, coordination in their efforts. You know, I don't think there's any suggestion that there's been club versus country issues or anything, but at least there'll be a continuity. There may be a continuity in terms of how teams play, for example, as well. New Zealand have done that for years, that their top Super Rugby sides try and play the exact same way that New Zealand do. I don't know, in Ireland, there's not that much input or interference from the Irish management in terms of the style with which they want a provincial side to play, and maybe that's something worth investigating.
I think you were saying after the Japan game that they looked more skillful than us as a team.
Yes.
Does that come from the style of play? Is that a facade? Or, like, I guess you've already made the point that this is a national team issue, not an ingrained root and branch issue, so I guess it is a facade.
Yeah, I think isolated skill levels, I wouldn't say if you picked off 4 of the Japan players and put them in the Leinster team, they would stand out and look like they've got more skill than the Leinster players. But I think as my own experience of playing with a team, the team falls into a rhythm. The execution of skills falls under that. If you have, I always remember we had one pre-season summer with Matt Williams and Willie Anderson where they simply practiced offloads with the forwards and the backs and the players linking in. We didn't do ruck practice all that summer. We might have got blitzed in a couple of early rucks, but suddenly you had guys like Peter Coyle playing tight head, doing pivot passes and flicking the ball out of tackles. And we put 40 points on Toulouse, on one of the great Toulouse sides in Donnybrook. We didn't fundamentally change as players in a 2-month period, but we were given a bit of license to use some skills that we probably had already. I don't think the license was given to players, and when there's a tension around trying something different, where maybe there's a threat around surrendering possession or making the wrong call, players do things that look silly. They can look well below par in terms of their ability. But I just think, I was at an event for Nissan during the week, and Stuart Lancaster was asked how did he change the culture in English rugby, and he said he changed it in a week. So you don't need, when he came in after the 2011 World Cup and there were midgets being thrown off boats in Auckland Harbour, and
he moved them out of their base. And
he moved them out of their base. He changed up how they thought. He he did some simple, smart, practical things, and we've a tendency maybe to go for the overkill, and there's not a massive amount wrong. It's just at the national team level. Unfortunately, in the last 2 years, I think Joe just became overly, tightened up our game too much, became overly conservative, and it just, the players looked like they kind of fell off a cliff in terms of performance and psychology and every part of it. I mean, to hear that they thought it was the best prep week they ever had and then go out and actually deliver a performance that looked so flat is really difficult to reconcile,
Yeah, they could do worse than the structures you're talking. Get somebody like Stuart Lancaster, given that those relationships are there, get him in at the very least to get. Could you come in and make a set of recommendations, having watched what you've seen over the last while, knowing what you know of me?
But it's interesting. Andy himself, I'm sure, is going to, if you watch an Irish team warming up on match day, Andy Farrell's not even on the field, really. It's constantly Joe. Joe's everywhere. He's running in between players. He's an extremely hands-on coach. That was his style. So you would wonder how much input he had, or how much opportunity he had to really influence how the team plays. So this is his opportunity now to go in and say, right.
You suggest that he's not that tarnished by what went on because he didn't have enough opportunity to voice his input.
I am, yeah. I would say I'd be curious to find out how much input any of the coaching team had, because from what it looks like, Joe is a very, very hands-on operator at every level, and he has micromanaged things, at every level. So it would be nice for Andy to come out from the shadow there and say, right, here's my philosophy, here's what I do. And let's give him a chance.
Any more? Can we put a little full stop on it
please.
now? I've just been watching some of the pitch side footage of we'll very briefly touch on this fourth place playoff, but the two lads, and Gatland and Hansen, and it looks like they're out for a walk in the park and have just bumped into each other. They couldn't give a shite about it by the looks of things. What's going to happen in this one?
I couldn't care less. I think it's one of sport's all-time
pointless games.
Pointless, anticlimactic games. Nobody wants to play it. They're doing their best. New Zealand have come out and said, we've got to show that we're resilient, and we've got to show the kids back home.
The dude for the jersey, I saw.
Yeah, you're going to hear that anyway.
The list of things, the jersey would, feature the top 10 of an normal week.
I presume New Zealand will win.
Eddie Jones was straight out after the semi-final saying that, that was a great performance against New Zealand, but we're going to have to, no matter who comes through this game tomorrow, we're going to have to up our ante in a big way next weekend. Isn't the truth that actually they can afford to dip off from where they were at last week and still beat South Africa?
I wouldn't have thought so. I think if you look at it in separation, England were arguably one of their greatest ever performances last Saturday, and if you compare that to how bad South Africa were winning against Wales, and just put the two of them together, yes, England could drop down a gear playing against that standard of South Africa. But South Africa have good history in World Cup finals. They're hugely physical. And I think the physicality is always an interesting thing. I did say we were going to draw a line on it, but if we look at how Ireland were stopped, it was about teams physically stopped us in terms of the one-to-one collisions, and that had a knock-on effect on the quality of the rest of our game. So if you take England, for example, the South Africans say, right, one last effort, 80 minutes, we're huge physical specimens and we're emotionally at fever pitch. Let's just physically stop England gain momentum. And what have they got outside of that? Now, I do think they've got variation in their game and they've got the capacity to find solutions, but it's going to make life a lot harder for them. And they're a vastly more physical side than the All Blacks side, I think, as well. So I think it's going to be a hugely interesting game and a clash of styles, and I would fully hope that England come through it and win, because for the sake of rugby, that the style that South Africa won the World Cup in 07 like set the game back about 3 years. So let's hope England can win in a similar style to how they won last week, by playing brilliant rugby, by playing a brilliant kicking game, playing a brilliant distribution game, playing a physical game, a dynamic game as well. Very combative, but South Africa don't have 2 or 3 types of style of play. They've won, and they're going out to stop England.
Yeah, and Rassie Erasmus says they're not going to deviate from that, like almost smirking when asked the question, but like, we're clearly not going to deviate off the plan.
No.
So how does that clash of styles, what happens when they clash?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to how they can affect England's England's set piece ball for a start. England will launch a lot of attack from their scrum or line out if they can disrupt that. The scrum is going to be fascinating, as they've picked like they've Kitchoff and Malcolm Marks on the bench again, and they've 2 guys maybe who are considered more physical scrummagers and more technically strong scrummaging guys to come in and just put the squeeze on their source of their possession. So I think the line out and scrum will be very key in that. Their line speed, how fast they pressurise England when they've got the ball, and then if they can catch them, they'll have no problem putting them on the floor. I mean, it's the idea of how fast they come off the line and squeeze England's execution there. So I would imagine they'll be focused on their kicking game to improve, because their kicking game was awful. They kicked a lot against Wales, but a lot of it was rubbish. So if they can kick more accurately and put the squeeze on the England back 3 again, you've often seen cases. I would have a tiny little question mark around Johnny May, for example.
Would you, defensively?
Just being I've incredibly fast and good attack play, but just I'd have a question mark about him.
He's been decent under the high ball.
He has, yeah, but I think just there's something about him.
Go on. What are you thinking?
Just there's a classic winger, presentation.
Now, yeah.
This is a long-standing prejudice that I would have as an out half. By the way, you try and pick off the wingers by purely just by gut instinct, and you're like, I'm going to put a few up on him and see if he cracks.
Yeah.
And Johnny May,
you think he might?
Yeah, I think they might go after him, and if he drops one early, I think they might just be that type of side that will just repetitively do it. I've seen it happen on a few occasions. Not sure, maybe they could go after it's Watson on the other side, isn't it? They could do either, but I do think that'll be an interesting area. They'll also look to try and put England under significant pressure. Yeah. And
the flip side, obviously, Ford is like not necessarily really a running out half. He'll put players through or look to kick from the boot. Ronan O'Gara in the Examiner this morning was saying that he's gone back, and he had initially been very critical of him and said that he's a bit of a weak point for that England team, but he's kind of gone back at that now and said actually his quality of execution from place ball and out of hand has been really top notch.
Yeah, and also, which is ironic, if Rog was criticised him, he's made something like 58 out of his last 60 tackles in international rugby. So as a weak link there, he's ironed that out. He's not making dominant tackles because he's too small to do that, but he's not missing any, and that affords his back row a chance. He can stick on them like a piece of chewing gum until the artillery arrives, and that's always been a tactic for small out halves. I think it's unfair to say he's not a running threat. I think he has that in his toolbox, but what he's really learned is that his role is to make everyone else around him look better, and he distributes really well. When he wants to run wide, he'll drop deeper and he'll give players outside him time. When he wants to take it to the line, he'll change his alignment. He'll be very, very flat and be a threat. And he's got a really nice kicking game now that I'm sure Rog is looking at and appreciating in terms of or identifying as a strength that he himself had so brilliantly, So I think it's a fair and just selection, because he made, he'd well documented cock-ups in the last World Cup, and it's nice to see him get a chance again.
Yeah. Matt Dawson, reading some of his stuff on the BBC during the week, he was talking about like the classic, how many teams from that team would get into that team.
Oh yes.
And was like a big fat zero. was his
for the 0-3 side.
yeah, he said for
side.
this South Africa team versus this England team. How many South Africans were
sorry.
in the England team? And he was like, he made some arguments around
Cheslin Colby
versus May. He was giving it to May. He was
no
giving
chance.
it
Not
Ben
a-
Youngs
not
over
a hope.
Faf Clark.
No, that's Matt Dawson at his arrogant best, I would say. Faf de Klerk would walk into the team. He's a far superior player to Ben Youngs. I think Ben Youngs, in fairness, I was critical of him, had probably his best game in an England shirt last week. But before that, even across the last 8 to 12 months, I was really looking at Youngs, thinking he's the one player that they're not quite world class.
Do they get away with that because they have Ford and Farrell in their backs at the moment, because they don't really rely on Nine as much of a playmaker?
I think they get away with it more because of what's in front of him as opposed to what's outside him. I mean, they've got one of the best back rows in the world, and they definitely have the best front five in the world. So Ben Youngs is operating, the ball's coming up to him on a silver platter, and he can take his time to make decisions, and at times even...
Same could be said of Faf, really, that he's getting it on the silver platter as well.
Yeah, but I think Faf has more... he's more dynamic around the field. I think he reads the game better. He makes decisions. Last week when there was a scrum wheel and Wales took it onto the left-hand side, his anticipation, he diagonally ran in the opposite direction to everyone else to cover what he knew was going to be a kick based on how Wales had set up and saved a try. It kind of got glossed over a little. That's the type of thing he's got, that I think maybe the ability to think more quickly and more clarity than Ben Youngs. So I'd probably say Faf gets in there, and maybe Cheslin Colby as well. Well, definitely Cheslin Colby, actually.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's not a huge amount. Yeah.
He's got a couple of 50-50 shots. He went through some of them. To be fair, you kind of reading it as an Irish person, I was like, well, his 50-50 call there is the classic. We do the exact same
50-50,
stuff
but
ourselves.
it's actually 70-30.
Yeah. So what happens?
Oh, I think England will win. In a brilliant battle compared to last week. I don't think they'll be
the same game.
No, I think it'll be quite a different game. I think it's a matter of, can England hold their nerve, because I think they're going to be hit with an onslaught. And sometimes what you've got to do is not try and play your way out of the onslaught, because the fancy stuff gets really messed up, and the nice wide passes or the flick passes seem to feed this hunger in the opposition defence, and you see a player gets smashed man on ball, and ball starts bouncing around the floor, and a guy kicks on through, and the crowd get fever pitch, So I think what they've to do is manage the onslaught for as long as they can, and I think South Africa will eventually tire, and I think England have the dynamism and the skill level to then pick them off in that last 15-20 minutes, and just they need to be patient. Their kicking is excellent. Hopefully pick up a few penalties they'll be looking for. If South Africa are I would imagine South Africa are going to be dicing with rules, a little bit, flirting around the offside line a lot. So
we'd all cheer them home.
If I wouldn't cheer South Africa home if they win.
England, I mean.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I mean, I'd rather England win, because I like the style with which they play. But we've got to deal with the.
We're mature now as a nation. This is the.
No, it's tough going. It's going to be tough.
And they're I don't know. I think they might be around for a while as well. We shall see.
Well, they're a young side. So, yeah.
Pleasure having you in. Enjoy I know you want to get away as quickly as you can to get the TV on and watch this bronze medal final. So we'll let you out the gap. Enjoy the game tomorrow. Thanks a million, Andy Dunne.